Okay, good morning. Boker Tov on this fine Sunday morning. Happy New Year, happy Solar New Year, as we've written in the title. And there's a lot to talk about, a lot to be thankful for. Let me make sure here that I turned off. Sometimes I remember, sorry for my hands over there. Let me make sure that I turned off any, let's turn this off. And okay, so we're good. I just wanted to make sure that any phone calls do not disturb us over here. Okay, hope everybody had a wonderful Shabbat, wonderful celebrations last night. And a couple of weeks ago, I sort of introduced, and then I forgot, that we should introduce the class with two mitzvahs. We should introduce the class with a bracha, of course, as we usually do on the coffee, on the delicious coffee. But I also want to introduce the class was doing a mitzvah of tzedakah, putting a coin or a dollar bill, whatever it might be, in the tzedakah pushka, as to start the class with another mitzvah, and also a way of invoking or bringing down blessings into our Torah discussion over here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiya bidvaro. Hope you answered amen, or you're drinking your own coffee. So, title of the class was, should you make a holiday resolution, a New Year's resolution? You know, everybody talks about it, of how most resolutions that we make, we don't keep. And so what's the point of making a resolution if you're not going to keep it? And, when it comes to sort of New Year's, and we're celebrating a new year, which highlights the blessing of time. So it's definitely a time to discuss time management. How much time do you have? And that question could be on a sort of daily basis, on our lifespan basis. How much time do you have? So I want to discuss a couple of these topics. They're important topics. They're sort of like foundational topics in our day-to-day life. And I want to talk about it within, I'm reaching here for the Chumash, within the context of also a discussion in the Torah portion that we just read. So sit back, relax, and let's study some Torah together. So with regards to resolutions, so of course, we should make resolutions. Why should we make resolutions? Even if often these resolutions are not kept. So the answer is two-pronged, two parts to the answer. The answer is not to make resolutions. The answer is, so one part of it is because the sign of a human being or the sign of being alive and of a human being is growth. The sign of life is that it continues to grow, as the Rebbe once told someone. The sign of a human being is the desire to improve, as King Solomon says in the Ecclesiastes, in Kohelet, that the Ruach HaAdam Ha'olehi Lamayla, the spirit of man, wants to always rise upward, and the spirit of animal is Yoredet Lamata, goes downward to materialism and to self sort of gratification. But man always looks to improve, to go higher, to rise. So, of course, we should make resolutions in order to evaluate ourselves and improve. That's number one. And the fact that so many resolutions are not kept, of course, over there, the simple answer is that you got, like everything else in life, you got to look at ways how to resolve that issue and say, okay, what could I do to make sure that my resolutions do last? And maybe we'll talk about this at the end of the class, if I remember, as we circle back to this. Now, in terms of time management, because New Year's, we're celebrating and thanking the fact that we have lived until this point, and Baruch Hashem, thank God, we are now entering into a new year, which is time that has passed, and we're thanking God for the time that we will be given and granted. And that highlights the value of time and time management. I know sometimes I might ask my teenager to do something, and the teenager might answer and say, I'm busy, I cannot do it. And the question is, busy with what? What are you busy with? So that's the first question in assessing time management. So the first question we should ask ourselves is, how busy are we? So let me highlight or bring a little more sort of strength to that question. Just a mere maybe 100 years ago, or maybe perhaps a little bit more than that, just to provide your meal every single day took a lot of work and time. You had to chop wood just to have a fire. You had to go ahead and pluck the chicken and prepare it, where all these things are now basically almost instantaneous. You had to wash the dishes. Again, you had to chop wood and put up a fire so that you could have hot water to wash the dishes. Clothing, to have clothing, you had to spend who knows how much time to go ahead and sew your own clothing or to knit your own clothing. Every single chore took who knows how much time. But today, we are blessed that you go to the store and you have ready-made food or almost ready-made food. There's so many things that we have today of our basic necessities. Water. We don't have to go down to the well or out to the well and draw water for bathing, whatever it might be. So the question is, we should have all this extra time, but yet we are busy. But what are we busy with? The same technology that has given us all these blessings and made our time so productive has also been a tremendous distraction. What do we do with all that extra time that we have? And here is where sort of time management enters into the discussion. If there is something that's important to you as a human being for growth, the availability for using and utilizing our time in a more productive, in a more holy, in a more meaningful, useful way, versus, as we always have freedom of choice, to waste so much time in a time where we consider ourselves so busy, is the discussion at hand, is the choices that we make. There is really a lot of time that we do waste based on the availability to get some of our necessities done so quickly. So that's a simple perspective that sometimes we forget, and we should remember that in terms of thanking God for time and time management. Now, I want to go into a very interesting discussion and a couple of sort of powerful stories, which we'll do so in a moment. But in terms of taking on resolutions, as we started this class, of course, you should take on resolutions. But I would say that if you want those resolutions to endure, there's just some simple tips. And I know some of them I do myself. Some I hear from others. When you take on a resolution, you should take on resolutions that are, first of all, more specific rather than general. In other words, instead of saying, I'll be a kinder person, you might say, I will be kinder to so-and-so. Or I will, when I react in a given way to a given trigger, I will try to improve on that. So this is, breaking it down into pieces. That's number one. Number two, it doesn't have to be big things, small little steps. A small resolution goes a very, very far distance. I will also say something that I do is that I try not to take on permanent resolutions. If I take on that I'm going to study, I'm going to learn something meaningful, I'm going to enhance my prayer or whatever it is. So first of all, I will say, okay, I'm going to enhance my prayer, that I'm going to zero in to one line of the prayer, 2 lines of the prayer where I focus a little bit more intently and so on. I will try to break it down into very small pieces that are that I could swallow, so to speak. And number two, what I do, and again, this is what I do. It works for me, and you might say, okay, that makes sense. It'll work for me or not. You could decide whether it works for you. But what I also do is I try not to make a resolution forever. I usually try to say, okay, for the next 30 days, for the next 60 days, this is what I'm going to do. And that usually works for me because I know it's a limited time. And then after 60 days, I could evaluate. I could do it. Some days yes, some days not. But at least I've taken a resolution. I've moved forward. I've trained the brain. A lot of times the reason we can't break out of habits is because our brain becomes, for the efficiency of our brain likes habits because the habits that we get into takes less power, less sort of energy from the brain, and therefore the things that you end up doing just out of habit become easier for the brain, and it could focus on other things. So sometimes there are things that you do, like brushing your teeth, that afterwards you don't even remember, did I do it, did I not do it, because your brain just went there and did it. And it took less focus and energy from your brain. So in order to take on resolutions and be effective with them, it could be difficult because the brain now has to change its habit, which is difficult for the brain. Again, because of the effectiveness of the brain, habits are a good thing in a sense to make your brain more efficient. But if it's a bad habit, it has the opposite effect. So therefore, sometimes you take on a resolution for 30 days, for 60 days, it can start to change your habit. And from that point, it can be easier. But regardless, at least for 30 or 60 or 90 days or a week or 2 weeks or 1 day, whatever it is, you have done something good, something something that, an area of growth, something positive, which as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, you do one mitzvah, you do one good deed, the effect of that is everlasting, is eternal. So, L'chaim for that discussion, L'chaim. And I want to now, in discussing time management, there's another aspect. They spoke about it until now more sort of quantitatively. I want to speak about it more qualitatively. By sharing a couple of thoughts. One thought is that I remember when I was a yeshiva boy, a yeshiva student, growing up in Crown Heights. Thumbs up for all the Brooklynites over here. And if you're from New York in general, you can give us one thumbs up, okay? Because Brooklyn is, at the end of the day, the best part of New York. And so when I was a yeshiva bacher, when I was a yeshiva student, and I had the immeasurable merit to attend the Rebbe's, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson's Farbrengens, almost weekly, which was an incredible experience, but not only incredible experience, which is who I am today. The impact and the sort of shaping of character of who I am today is by having that schus, that merit to have been at the Rebbe's Farbrengens. And I don't think in the Farbrengen past, where the Rebbe did not encourage increased learning Torah, study of Torah, which is our lifeblood. It's our right. So, as a yeshiva student, I remember hearing, and this is hearsay, but it fits the character, that one of the serious yeshiva boys of the time wrote a letter to the Rebbe. He wrote to the Rebbe the following. He said, every single time at the Farbrengen, at the Hasidic gathering, when you speak about increased learning, I take it seriously and I add. I don't know if he wrote, I had a minute, I had 5 minutes. He says, I've reached a point where I just can't add anymore. We spoke about time management, how much we waste time. But this was a serious, Oved Hashem, a serious servant of God. And he took the Rebbe's words literally and seriously. So he says, every time, Rebbe, you tell me to add, I add. But there's nowhere to add anymore. And the Rebbe answered him that when I say adding, it doesn't always mean quantitatively. It could also mean And it does also mean qualitatively. And since Torah and God are infinite, you could add in Torah study by going more in depth, by focusing more, by connecting more, by allowing it to impact you more, internalizing it more. And that is also included in increasing your Torah study. Now, I say this as an introduction to this discussion that I'm about to have. In this last week's Torah portion, okay, L'chaim. In this past week's Torah portion, we read about Vayigash, and I'll give a very short summary because I'm hoping that the listeners over here get a chance to read and learn and study the Parsha on their own. So we try not to review the basic Parsha. But just to give a really short synopsis to that for those who might not know what's going on in the portions of the week these days. So we read about, we have Abraham, we have Isaac, we have Jacob. These are the forefathers of the patriarchs of our people. Jacob had 12 tribes, 12 children, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, and so on, 12 tribes. As the Torah relates a couple of weeks ago, there was animosity, jealousy. For whatever reason, lots of insights, lots of commentaries in that. There was jealousy between Joseph and his brothers. Joseph was sold by his brothers, and he ended up in Egypt as a slave, where he was horribly mistreated, terrible sort of journey, tribulations, suffering, accusations. And then there is the famous dream that Pharaoh has, and Joseph is then taken out of the dungeon where he was placed because of false accusation, and he interprets Pharaoh's dream. He interprets Pharaoh's dream. It's the famous dream of the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine that will follow, and that during the 7 years of plenty, the whole of Egypt should save up for those 7 years of famine. And when the famine, and then Pharaoh raises Joseph up to be his viceroy, Mishneh LaMelech. The famine hits the entire land very, very hard, and Jacob tells his sons that they have to go down and purchase wheat, grain for the family. And then the Torah relates with much sort of emotion that how Joseph first does not identify himself to his brothers. He gives them a hard time. And the end result is that after 22 years of Joseph being absent from his dad, from Jacob, Joseph eventually reveals himself to his brothers. He says, Ani Yosef, the famous words, I am Joseph. Ha'od avichai, is my father still alive? And again, to make a long story short, Jacob is eventually told that Joseph is alive after 22 years of mourning for his lost son, who he thought was dead, and who he terribly mourned every single day, as the Torah and the Talmud elaborate on that. And after 22 years, Yaakov travels down to Egypt. And he finally sees his son. And this is what the Torah tells us. Listen to these words, okay? Let me open it up to the holy words of God, of the Torah. Listen to this. Parshat Vayigash. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. A minute. Okay, here we go. I'm going to first read it in Hebrew, and then I will translate. This is in Genesis chapter 46, verse 29. Okay, you with me? Vayeser Yosef Markafto, and Joseph harnessed his chariot. Vayal likras Yisrael Aviv Goshen. He went up to Goshen to meet Israel, his father. Vayera love, and Joseph appeared before his father. I put in the words Joseph because the verse just says, and he appeared before him. But Rashi tells us that the he over here refers to Joseph, and revealed to him refers to Jacob. Vayipol al tzavarav, he fell on his neck. Who fell on his neck? Joseph fell on his father's neck. Vayef kal tzavorov, and Vayef kal tzavorov od, and he wept on his neck profusely. Joseph wept profusely on his father's neck. What is missing in this verse? What is a little peculiar in this verse? Could you tell me? I'll wait 10 seconds. Can you tell me what is peculiar in this verse? Now, if you're a scholar and you've learned Rashi and maybe the Talmud, you would know the answer to what is peculiar in this verse. So I'll tell you what Rashi says. Rashi, who, when he is explaining the verse, is answering a question that arises that might grab our attention when learning the verse. So Rashi says like this, and over here I do not see, so here he brings over here in the verse, he brings I don't have the Hebrew of Rashi in front of me, although I basically remember because it's a very short Rashi. But here in the commentary on this particular Bible, as you know, there's many different editions of the Bible with different commentaries. So he says like this, Jacob did not fall on Joseph's neck and did not kiss him. What's strange in this verse is before it says, let's say when the brothers found out that Joseph, or when Benjamin found out that this was his brother Joseph, it says Joseph cried on Benjamin's neck and Benjamin cried on Joseph's neck. But here in the verse, it says Joseph fell on Jacob's neck and he cried profusely. Jacob doesn't make a sound. There's no reaction of Jacob. You didn't see your child for 22 years. No reaction? What's going on over here? Why is that missing in the verse over here? And therefore Rashi tells us the following. Herzach zu, as we say in Yiddish. Pay attention. Jacob did not fall on Joseph's neck and did not kiss him. Warum? Favos nicht. Why not? Because he was reciting the Shema. Shema Yisrael. Right? We all know that prayer. An affirmation of faith. Do you understand it? You listening, my dear friend, do you understand what Rashi is telling us? Jacob didn't cry. Jacob did not fall on his neck. No reaction. Why? He's reading the Shema. What's going on? Reconnected. Somehow the internet, you with me? Keeps on telling me trying to reconnect. I apologize for that. So, so what's going on? So he was reading Shema. So let me give you a little background. The background is the following. There is a law in the code of Jewish law, again, based on the Talmud, that during the Shema, when we say the Shema prayer, Shema Yisrael, Adoshem Elokeinu, that during that prayer, you are not allowed to interrupt. You're not allowed to interrupt. So while Yaakov was saying the Shema, even after not seeing his child for 22 years, I do not interrupt because I'm in the middle of saying the Shema. But the obvious question over here is the following. First of all, Joseph was not saying the Shema. If it's the time, every single day there's a mitzvah to say Shema twice a day, morning and evening. It's a mitzvah for all of us. So Yaakov is saying the Shema, Joseph is not saying the Shema. And besides, he couldn't say the Shema a moment before. He didn't know he's about to see his son. He couldn't say the Shema a moment later. And commentaries discuss this. There are various answers. One answer that's given is what one of the answers given, I'm not going to go into all the answers. There's various beautiful answers over here, but one answer that's given that I believe is attributed to the Kotzker Rebbe. Mendel Kotzker was a follower of the Ger Rebbe, if you know the Ger Hasidic dynasty. And the answer he gives is the following. He says that Jacob knew that never ever in his life before or after will he experience this height of emotions and passion from the deepest part of his soul, that he will feel that moment that he will reconnect, that he will see his beloved son, his favorite son, as the Torah says, Joseph, after 22 years of mourning. And he said, I want to capture that moment. Talk about time management. I want to capture that moment, and I want to direct it to thanking and experiencing Hashem, like Olga over here touched upon. I want to give it a little bit more flavor. He says, this is the highest human experience that I can experience, nothing greater. Know what I want to do with it? I'll have time to hug my son. I'll have time to spend time. I want to take it and direct it to Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. I want to take that moment and use it in the most productive, deepest way. I remember hearing an expression from the Rebbe. A lot of times just a little expression says so much. Rebbe says, a time wasted is not worthy of being called time. A time utilized is worthy of being called time. I want to share a story to highlight this message on a somewhat practical level. I heard a story this past week from Rabbi Shais Taub. Many of you know Rabbi Shais Taub, a wonderful teacher. And he related the following story. I actually jotted down the name over here because, I'm not so good about remembering names. So he said like this. Here's the name. He says I think he said he heard it from him directly. I think maybe he heard it on a class or in person. I don't know. He said like this. There is a Boston Philharmonic, I think conductor perhaps, or whatever it is. His name is or was Benjamin Zander. Initially, he was British, and he is British. I mean, he's initially from Britain. And he related the following story. He says he heard from a Holocaust survivor this following sort of powerful story. He said that she related to him, Chaim. She related to him that when she was a young girl, she was taken to the concentration camp. This is during the Holocaust. And she was there with her younger brother. And this was in the cattle cars, I think she said it was somewhere along that infamous journey where they took you and brought you to the concentration camp. And she turns around and she sees her little brother, and she sees her little brother lost his shoe. Now, what does an older sister do when they look at their brother and the brother lost the shoe? All you older sisters out there, be honest. What would you do? So she says, I shouted at him. I reprimanded him. What are you losing your shoe? What's going on? What are you schlemazel? What's going on? Then she says, listen to this. She says, a moment later, I turned around and my brother is gone. And I never saw him again. Never. That was the last words I said to my brother. And she says, I was so sort of ridden with guilt that these were the last words I said to my little brother. And the resolution I made for my life is that whenever I meet somebody, I should say something, or I should leave them with something that I will never regret of that being the last words I said to that person. It should be something meaningful. It should be something positive. It should be something that I don't regret it being my last words to that individual. This is part of time management. Time management, I suppose, said about the Rebbe saying you could go into Torah deeper and deeper and deeper. It's about time management, of course, is not about wasting time, but wasting time also has a qualitative aspect to it. Happy New Year. God gave us a new year, correct? It's about being fully present in the time and utilizing the time in the most productive, meaningful way. We have times that we unfortunately, I want to she and I'm going to try to keep this private. I don't like to, what I mean to say keep it private because it's with people that are around. I want to say this following story, which is a sad story. It's really a sad story for me. And the reason why I share this is for the good that I want to come out of this. And I'm not going to say names for the privacy of the family. So last week, I sit down to have dinner with my wife. And I get a phone call. I get a phone call from a very fine individual, really, someone who sort of wears his heart on the sleeve, his genuine heart on the sleeve. He's sort of dripping with heart and love and so on. But the time of the time when I got the call, I knew is not the usual time that this individual reaches out to me. Otherwise, I'm sitting with my wife, we're having dinner, I would let it go to voicemail and I'll call back. But because of the time that I got this call, I sensed that something was that I should answer the call. I answer the call and the person tells me that a member of their family tragically attempted suicide. And reaching out to me as a rabbi, how I could help. And basically that the member of the family is ready to speak to a therapist. Do I know a therapist that can be reached out to right now? At that time, it's sometimes difficult to get hold of somebody. I said, yes, I'll try. I'll get right back to you. And I did. I reached out to a wonderful therapist, and the therapist spoke to the family and was ready sort of to meet with this individual. Let me just answer that. Sadly, tragically, the next morning, I get a call that this person, again, attempted suicide, and this time they were successful. And I was thinking to myself, still thinking to myself, not necessarily to sort of from a sort of guilt perspective, but I was racking my brain, as I'm sure are others. That was a moment of time. Is there anything else that could have been done to use that moment of connection where the tragedy could have been prevented? Now, you could answer that question from various perspectives: religious perspective, bashert perspective. Yes, you do. That's not the point I'm trying to bring out over here. And I'm sure not trying to hurt the family, God forbid. I'm just saying that there are moments in time that come our way that it is a moment that can affect a lifetime. And part of time management is to be able to stop all time before and after, zero in on that moment, and make that moment the most important, the most valuable, and everlasting moment. There are things in our life sad and hopefully a lot more happy that moment lasts a lifetime. I remember, as many of my generation remember, the moment you heard about 9/11. You remember the moment you were there when your first child was born. It's a moment that lasts forever. Time management, Happy New Year, is about the resolution to go ahead and make time set aside. Talk about resolutions that are attainable. You can't live every moment that way. I mean, I don't think so. It's too intense. But make a resolution, suggestion of one resolution amongst many. You could pick whatever you want. This is a resolution. And I believe it, and it will enhance your life. It'll make you live longer, so to speak, because the moment will be a lifetime of a moment. That be sensitive every day to a moment or two or three. Some of it come your way, and some of it you might have to make happen. A moment where you sit down and do the prayer, Moda Ani, I offer thanks to God for returning my soul. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Hareini mikabel, I take upon myself to love a fellow as myself. Whatever that moment might be, but make that moment so meaningful that you're totally there. That's the best or way of time management. As Yaakov said, I am now about to experience a moment that I could never experience before and after. I'm going to utilize that time in the best and most effective way. So this is our Happy New Year discussion. Thank you for making my moments that I share Sunday mornings with you, for making it very meaningful to me, very fulfilling to me. I get a lot of feedback. I get questions. You're always welcome to ask questions, of course. I'd like to hear what are the top topics you would like discussed. You could send it to me here via Facebook or YouTube or any other mode of communication. And so thank you for that. Thank you for that I have merited to 2023 to be able to do this consistently and in good health. And I wish you for the new year many good resolutions. Good resolutions draw down blessing for good health. We show God we're using our time wisely, productively. May you have a year of abundance, a year of blessing, a year of good health, a year where we utilize those blessings. As the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe said, God gives us material blessings and we turn it into spirituality, into holiness. May we do so successfully. Have a wonderful and fantastic week. Please share these words of Torah with others so that the meaningful moment sort of expands by others hearing words of Torah and being inspired. Have a great week.